Maybe you are innocent.
Okay,
but you are found guilty.
If you're found guilty, I mean, if you've gone through the process and you're
found guilty.
So can we bring that conversation
what do you say
back,
about that?
please?
Yeah.
Can we bring that conversation
and
back?
this is what I'm saying. As somebody who cares about rights, you know, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a process. You do need a process, you know, but that process in itself ingrains the idea. Let me finish. Of rights, you know, the process itself does not simply say that on suspicion, you know, just because the police think, because that once you open that door, it's very hard to close it, and we saw it during Moi's time. You know, where they can cite anything and come and grab you. Now, people say, well, we are not in Moi's time. Actually, the people in power now, you know, and even if it was called in power, by the way, I'm not saying that this is just a Jubilee issue. Even if it was called in power, even if it was Gadara in power, you know, you really should not allow him the leeway to say that he will catch you, he will arrest you, he will surveil you whenever he feels like doing it, you know, because all he has to do is cite something called national security.
Okay, allow me to.
Let me ask
before you ask your question, because
it is very quickly on security. He said that the laws are the problem. That's how they're approaching this. You know, well, actually, look at the airport report after Mpeketoni. You know, says the problem isn't the laws. The problem is the laws are not being implemented. You know, we passed the National Police Service Act, not been implemented. In fact, yesterday, when they were deregistering NGOs, they used an act from 1990. Parliament passed the Public Benefit Organization Act last year. It's there, it's in the books, not been implemented. You know, and then we sit back and we say we need changes. How are we amending laws that we haven't even started implementing? We haven't
tried out. Okay, Irungu, why don't I give you a chance to respond to that?
Well, number one, in my own opinion, I disagree with him that presently the issue is about failure to implement law. No. Presently, it is an issue that we needed to come laws that we are going to align them with the Constitution, and also taking into account how to tackle the issue of insecurity. So therefore, to me, what we are trying to do is just to come up with a law that is going to take those two issues into account. The expanded rights system that we have, and also the new emerging issue of security. That's number one. Number two, you have also raised an issue concerning what about 15 years from today. On that issue, I would say number two, if at all maybe Al-Shabaab is defeated, no longer have security issues, is now 20 years from today, of course, we can always amend the law. We can always change that if need be. If need be. That's number one. So
are you agreeing?
So the point is...
So Irungu, allow me to ask, are you agreeing, for the benefit of doubt, that we are implementing a law right now as a knee-jerk reaction to what is happening in the country?
Of course, it goes without saying that you make laws to respond to situations which arise, isn't it? It goes without saying. So the point is, it is true. This law is essentially as a result of what is happening in the country. Because you are the same people who are going to nail Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy for failure to provide for security. But on the other hand, he cannot really enforce security, whereas he is fettered by the law. So essentially, this is a reaction to the issue of insecurity. That's number one. Number two, and very important, Kenyans appear to be really fixated with the letter of the law. And I can tell you practically...
With the what of the law?
Letter of the law. That the law provides for this. So therefore, when the parliamentarians try to change, this is the kind of situation that we may have. No, that is not the reality of any functioning legal system. What underpins a functioning legal system is not only the letter of the law, but the culture. So therefore, for instance, he is saying that there's a possibility that these laws are going to be used as against, let's say, for instance, liberals, opposition, against people who are innocent. That's neither here nor there. The Moi regime has gone.
Do we discredit it then?
No, the point is, the Moi regime, which used to use law in a bad way, has gone. It has gone. It was underpinned by several other international factors. It is gone. So therefore, presently, even if we were to make that law, I can give you 100% guarantee that law will never be used against an individual in the opposition to curtail freedoms.
It is impossible. It
No,
is
no.
impossible.
I can give you personal.
No. Allow me to jump in, gentlemen. No, it is impossible to guarantee that.
Let me give you a good example. Let me give you
We can
a
trust
good
the government.
example.
Let-
Let me give you a good example. No.
Let me help this. Let me help him here.
No, Mutambu,
Let me
let's
give
allow
you a
Irungu to
good
finish.
example.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, allow me to give you a good example. In February this year, in January this year, Raila Odinga uttered some words in Kisumu, which in my own opinion, I felt he was violating the law. So I gathered evidence. I reported to the police and said, look at this guy, he has done something wrong. I'm telling you, the police did not investigate against him. The DPP refused to take up that case. Why? Because they don't want to be seen as people are clamping on opposition. I understood them. I'm telling you, no one would touch that file. And despite there being evidence very strong that indeed this guy may have violated the law.
Well,
and why? The bottom line is we have reached a situation where in this country where the rights of the opposition are so entrenched to the extent at times they may violate the law and get away with it. Same way with you people in the media. You may do something if you are to take out the book of the statute. You have really violated that law. But because of this new thing that, hey, no, we must protect the right of the media, no one can come after you. So the bottom line, we are now in a new world. Kenya has moved on, and I can tell you, Jubilee cannot go back, not because of the law per se, because of the new culture which is underpinning our society.
Mutambu,
This is
in
what
your
I want
unique
to tell my
situation,
friend.
yes.
This is what I want to tell my friend. Between the law and the weapon, what would you fear?
what do you mean?
There's a weapon here, and there's a law.
Well, the law
What is
can
more
be a
dangerous?
weapon.
What is more dangerous?
The law can be a weapon. Can be every much as bad
No.
as
What I'm
as a
trying to
gun
tell you is this. Well, this is what I'm trying to tell you. As we speak now, there are companies out there manufacturing bombs, manufacturing machine guns. For what? For elephants?
For sale.
For sale for what?
For sale to people.
To do what?
To governments.
To do what
whatever.
with those
What do
weapons?
you mean? Explain.
To do what?
But
What I'm trying
people
to
buy
tell you.
weapons for a wide variety of reasons. Poachers
But-
buy them to kill bloody elephants. So let's
Not for poachers.
let's be
Laws are
be
made for
specific
people.
about
What I'm
what
trying
you're
to tell
asking.
you, laws are made for people, and you have to obey the law. And if you have nothing to hide, or if you do not want to be a criminal, you do not have to be afraid of the law. That's
Okay,
what I'm
but
trying to
yes,
tell you.
Mutambu,
Yes,
allow me to use the same example you used about being ill. If I'm not sick and the doctor says to me, I want to remove your clothes so that I can do a physical examination on you, because I know that I don't have this contagious disease that he is accusing me of having, do I then allow him to
The doctor
undress
will
me?
not accuse you unless you go to the hospital. So the police will not, you will not be detained unless you are suspected.
Edith, the idea,
The doctor will not
idea
come to
that
your
the
house.
law is
The doctor
never
will not come
used
to your house.
against innocent
You
people.
will go to hospital
is
because you're
a
feeling
lie.
something.
It is a lie. The law every day is used against innocent people. The people in power are interested in staying in power.
Okay, then
And the people who are
let's-
outside the power are interested in coming to
true,
power.
and I agree.
Mutambu
So the
Gandara-
idea that because they're in power, somehow they become benevolent. Of course not. They use and they abuse the law, and we see it every day. In Kenya, in fact, you guys are legislators, I think you should be looking into this. In Kenya, there was a report last year by The Standard, by De Sosarigo on KTN, saying the government knows the 11 people who are the top kingpins of poaching, knows and protects them. They've got documents that have their names and protects them, stops their arrest. I don't hear any of you guys going to speak about it. You sit here and you excuse impunity. I reported and there was evidence and he was never caught, and you excuse it. You sit here and you excuse your police going and murdering innocent people because they cite national security. In fact, if I was to be very honest, you guys sitting here are the very problem we have with security. It's because you don't think these laws matter. You think that it's a game. It's something that you go and play in parliament. They matter. They have real consequences for people. They have real consequences for the lives of people. When you say that government can surveil everybody, it has a real consequence. When you say guys can be arrested and held, in essence, for long periods of time without being charged, it has real consequences. You know, yesterday we saw somebody charged with simply writing a tweet that Uhuru Kenyatta is an adolescent president. You know, I have drawn Uhuru Kenyatta in a nappy. You know, how do I know tomorrow they won't come and grab me and say, well, you are whatever, impugning or reducing the authority of a public official, whatever it is the charge they had put. You know, these are laws with real consequence, and I would really hope that you guys as legislators actually treat this with the seriousness and with the gravity that it has, and actually look and imagine how these very laws can come and later on be used against you. The people who passed the laws in Kenyatta's day suddenly found that those laws can very quickly be turned around and used against them, and they were.
So,
Yeah.
Mutambo, allow me to go
Yes.
to pick up from where Gadara has left off. Are we looking at this, and this is the question that Irungu answered in part, are we looking at this long term? Are we thinking of the consequences, or are we thinking now Jubilee versus CORD?
To me, I'm not looking at it from Jubilee versus CORD point of view. I'm looking at it from the point of what is happening in our country today. The constitution we passed took away some privileges and took away some powers from some officers. Like, for example, we have a district commissioner who is out there, is the chairman of security committee. That person cannot even control and cannot even command the police down there. We used to have APs. They used to be under command of the district commissioners. Today, the commissioner cannot command those people. We used to have an administration police who used to go down to the villages. This is what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at what my friend here is arguing about being detained or not being detained. I'm looking at that person in the village being secure. That's my priority number one.
Let me ask a follow-up question to
Yes.
that. Why were these changes made? Wasn't it to decentralize power from the people who were perceived to be misusing it?
You see, people make mistakes. I will tell you, the constitution we passed, it is not good for this country. And that's why we are trying to amend it.
Okay.
Come on. I was the first person to say
Okay.
we need to amend the... I was the first person to say we need to amend the constitution.
Is this
and
then-
actually, I think I remember I was in this station when I said we cannot prosper with 47 counties
Then,
in this country.
Irungu, let me-
Today, what is happening? But because it was Mutambo who said nobody cared to listen. When somebody like Raila, for example, said, no, now we need to amend the constitution to Nataka change, everybody starts singing the song. So this is the problem. We tend to listen to people instead of listening to the real problem.
Okay. Then let me ask a question. Someone here has written a very good question, has not left their name. The panel is refusing to think that the proposed laws are infringing on the Bill of Rights and should be subjected to a referendum. Let them declare their intention to pass an unconstitutional law. Is this, as Mutambo is saying, a backdoor way of changing the constitution?
No, first let me say that we in Jubilee, we do like this constitution. It's a very good constitution. That's number one. Number two, these laws have no intention at all to amend the constitution. If the intention was about amending the constitution, simply would have brought an amendment to the constitution instead of a statute. Number three, if at all we are talking about amending a constitution on the areas of the Bill of Rights, the constitution is very clear. We would have to provide that in a referendum. So the point is, we like the constitution. We have no intention of abrogating the rights which are captured in the constitution. So therefore, but on the other hand, the issue is about looking at how to address the issue of the constitution. How do you take into account human rights? How do you therefore also come up with ways of addressing the problem of insecurity which is bedeviling our country? So the proposals, in my own opinion, is like a middle ground. You want to protect the rights of Kenyans. You also want to ensure that the issue of security is foisted.
Then-
And in my own opinion, I think we have been able to come up with a good balance. I don't foresee a situation where we are going to violate the constitution. I don't foresee a situation where we are going to violate the rights. In the event, of course, in the unlikely event we do so, of course, Kenyans have the recourse, once the proposal are crystallized into law, to go to the High Court to strike down those proposals. Of course, we do not make those proposals with an intention that they are going to be struck down by the High Court, no. And in fact, no wonder we have really taken into account all those issues from Kenyans, all those criticism from my colleagues here, all those criticism from Mr. Nyochai, to ensure that we do align the proposal with the Constitution. In my own opinion, where I sit, I have not doubt about it, that these proposals, they do align themselves properly with the Constitution.
Well, again, it would be really nice if in today's debate, there was actually a reflection of the concerns that are there, because they're not, as again, just limited to the few clauses we cited. There are quite a number, and actually I can even give a copy of what Amnesty International says about most of the laws in there. What our own NGOs who looked at this, and even individuals and lawyers who looked at this complain about. And I think it's important that we perceive that this is not an issue of just either security or human rights. That's a false dichotomy. It's how you ensure security while protecting human rights. Because our state itself, in its history, has perpetrated huge, a vast amount of state-sponsored terrorism, what you might call that. When you look at what used to happen in places like in the Northeast Province, and the massacres there. If you read through the TJRC report and see what our state itself has done to its own citizens, then you become a bit wary about these laws that simply give state officials unfettered powers, unchecked powers. One of the problems, one of the major things about the laws, and I would hope that you guys today will look at it, is the discretion being given. Either it's to the CS in putting a curfew, that nobody goes back and looks at. Nobody, not legislators, not a court, sits and looks at the imposition of this curfew and says, well, actually, is this a reasonable measure to take? We give them that power, hoping they will not abuse it. And this hope is what I want us to remove, the idea that we can trust the people in power. Time and time again throughout history it has been shown that people in power are not trustworthy. Power corrupts, So let's be careful about simply allowing them discretion to do things that we think will only be done to the bad guys. For as long as you have the power, those things can very easily be turned against the ordinary individual. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, Matambo, I see you have something to say.
What I want to say is this. In everything, there must be a due process. If you want to get a criminal, you must do your thorough investigation. That investigative, there must be a process, right? You just don't wake up tomorrow and say, my friend here is a terrorist. You must have some evidence, and you must gather those evidence.
Yeah.
And by doing so, you must have, for example, like in your house, if you want to know, like, I want to thank the media what they did the other time, showing how nannies are treating children when they leave them. What did they do? They put cameras so that you can tell what is happening in your house. Because, you are not a superstition. You cannot know what is happening until you see, because seeing is believing. So if I want to know what you said to who, where,
you investigate.
I must investigate, and I must come from somewhere. So how do I investigate? How do I suspect that you are talking to a terrorist? How do I suspect that you are communicating to a terrorist? I must first tap your phone and listen.
No.
What you are saying. There's no other way. Unless you want to tell me Jesus Christ, unless you want to tell me Jesus Christ will come and tell me this is a terrorist. There must be a process. This is the point you do not want to understand.
Mutambo, allow me to jump in here.
Yes.
It's actually bizarre that you've mentioned that, because I'm looking here at a clause which says a person who is in possession of a weapon, an improvised explosive device, or components of an improvised explosive device for purposes of terrorism commits an offense and is liable. And going back to what Kadari is saying, that there's so many clauses in here which are so subjective.
Can you read that again?
A person who is in possession of a weapon, an improvised explosive device, or components of an improvised explosive device for purposes of terrorism commits an offense and is liable on conviction to imprisonment for a term of not less than 20 years. And
Yes.
so my question to you is, what is to stop a police officer from arresting me because I have fertilizer in my house, which could be used as a component of an explosive device
Nah,
for issues
nah,
of
nah,
terrorism?
You can't say that.
You can't,
I mean,
you can't
it's,
say
it's,
that.
it's
No,
a
no.
simplistic
No,
way
no,
of
no, no,
thinking.
no,
It's a
no, no.
simplistic way
No,
of
no, no, no,
thinking,
you
but
can't
one that
say
we
that.
have seen before.
No, 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 no.
No,
You can't say that.
no, the
This
reason
is the
why-
same question. That is where I was coming from. When I asked my friend here about the law of drugs, okay? How many people are arrested with drugs? If somebody hates you, they would come and put a drug on you. How many cases do we have? They are not there. So why are we getting afraid
What
of
do you
this?
mean they're not there?
What do you mean they're not
sense.
there? Okay, hold that
No,
thought. I understand that we
can
have
I
a phone
reply
call.
to your question?
Yes, Irongo, you,
One
you-
point.
Yes.
That clause is very clear. It's self-explanatory. It says, for the purposes of terrorism, meaning when a police officer takes you before a magistrate or a court, the first thing he must do is to prove that that weapon is for the purposes of terrorism. So the operative term there, the operative expression is for purposes of terrorism. Meaning, if you're able to prove, yes, indeed, it's a weapon, but it's not for the purpose of terrorism, you cannot be caught by that law. But if indeed they're able to bring evidence that this one was for purposes of terrorism, then of course you are in.
Let's hold that thought. We have a caller on the line. We have a caller on the line. Mohammed Mahmoud calling us from Mombasa. Hello, good morning. Mohammed? Mohammed, this is your last chance. Can you hear me? All right, it appears that we don't have him on the line anymore.
No, you have,
Dave-
you have me on the line.
Oh, there you are.
Yes, yes. How are you? I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, could you please raise your voice just a little so we can hear you?
Yes, I'm raising my voice.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm calling from Mombasa,
Uh-huh.
and my name is Mohammed. I'm calling from Mombasa. I wanted to ask the panel some questions
Mm-hmm.
regarding the bill.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that Citizen the other day that the bill actually limits the number of refugees in the country.
The number of what? Refugees.
up to-
Okay, yes.
Refugees up to 150,000. Yes. Is it true? Because we are a member of the international community that actually we have a law that actually ratified the Geneva Convention.
Okay.
And Kenya is also the headquarters for United Nations. So we cannot. We actually, what we are trying to do is to ratify an international convention against what we had already written.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mohammed Mahmoud, calling us from Mombasa. We also have David Bugu on the line. David, are you able to hear me? Good morning.
Good morning, madam.
How are you?
Fine. I've been following the debate very well.
Mm-hmm.
And it appears to us people are taking the law as if it's something that will come and humiliate Kenyans. If people can like Kazara can come and operate in these sides of Kenya, like Western Kenya, Bungoma, Maraba, along the border point, you'll understand and appreciate that our laws operate to the benefit of our people, because we remain the only. We are only two countries in Africa whereby you don't see people walking with guns. And if we don't put law in order the way we are talking of the police to be able to enforce, because if you see me with a gun, you will either suspect me to be a policeman, to be a CID, or a reservist, or a licensed person to carry the gun. And the actual thing we are talking about, the security law, is to protect our people. And mind you, we are the people on the border point. We usually see a lot of commotion coming from the other end. People close and they don't want to be investigated. They don't want to be inspected. They close with other items, because if you look at our border point, the major problem we are having, even ourselves at the border, we usually take care of ourselves. We see any suspicious character, we inform the police immediately, and they have to follow it up, because this is something that we need to look at it as Kenyans as a benefit. The parliamentarians are not doing it for the sake. Nairobi people are safe because you can see a police.
Okay. David, thank you. I think we've got your point. He's calling us from Bungoma. So why don't we begin with David's question? He's saying that for him, it's a necessary discomfort infringing into his privacy, because he feels very insecure at the moment.
Well, First let's accept that the problem we have in Kenya is not just one of terrorism. I know the government has been keen to sort of frame it only as majorly a terrorism problem. What we have is a breakdown in security, throughout vast swaths of this country, and especially actually along many border points, and you can even think apart from the west and the east, the border is Somalia, My question is, how does this law solve that? I don't see anything in this law that will make our border more secure, or matching this law will do it. The second thing is this, again, and I will repeat, it's a false dichotomy to say you've got to give up your rights to be secure. That is not true. The Constitution, in fact, in its reading about, I forgot what the article is, where it talks about national security, says that this has to be carried out, the activities have to be carried out in conformity with the Bill of Rights and in protecting human rights. So let's be clear that we're not being asked to choose. We don't have to choose between one and the other. If police want to arrest somebody, and this should be, I think, fairly plain to anybody. If police want to arrest somebody, whether he's here in Nairobi or he's in Bungoma or he's in Mandera, that the police themselves have to show cause. They can't just go and round him up. If they want to listen to what you're saying when you're talking to your wife, when you're talking to your kids, that they've got to show cause why it is that they think that conversation is one they need to record or to hear. This is all we are asking, that there be safeguards, to the exercise of this power, because the moment you don't have it, they can listen to anything. You go to a bar and they're talking about politics, and then you don't know, it's just somebody now listening to this conversation. Are they recording are they taking down my emails when I'm writing about ETC, about the government, ETC? And studies have shown that when people know they are being surveilled, they are being watched, they moderate their behavior. This is a way of simply making people conform, of killing dissent. It's no accident that across history, most of the most repressive regimes, the first thing they have invested in is surveillance. Look at what East Germany used to do. They collected files and files on ordinary citizens. Your neighbors reporting on you. It is the very things we are talking about now. But we seem to assume that these things can't be used in bad ways. Well, they actually have. And history is littered with those examples. So all I'm asking for is, let's have safeguards. Let's stick to what the issues are. Let's have the safeguards in there, so at discretion is not just a guy in NIS waking up and saying, well, I think you're going to be, and then I'm going to listen into you. Let him go to a court. Let him go and get an order.
Let me bring Irungu in for the interest of time, and that your point ties in well with a tweet that we got from the question mark, who says, why not then amend things like the Terrorism Act instead of giving us a cocktail of amendments which doesn't seem to augur well with people?
Well, in my own opinion, I think amending Terrorism Act will not be sufficient, because when you look at the way police operate, their work is affected by several statutes. For instance, we have the Criminal Procedure Code, we have the Penal Act, we have so many other laws that indeed impinge on the way the police do their work. So therefore, when you amend one act, in my own opinion, it will not be sufficient. So therefore, you have to come up with so many amendments in respect to various laws. No wonder these proposals are called statute miscellaneous amendment, because they are going to affect various laws. So it is not practically possible. That's number one. Number two, you must also not look this law in isolation with other legally established institutions. For instance, we do have what we call the office of the Ombudsman. It is the person who is heading that is Mr. Atieno Molo, a very good lawyer. We do also have the Kenya National Human Rights Commission. It's also a body that is established both by a statute and also by the Constitution. We do have so many other institutions whose mandate is to check the state. When the state starts violating the laws, Kenyans have recourse. which are established by the laws. So therefore, the point is that we may have a law where the state is going to abuse the rights of the people and the citizens don't have a recourse. It is not true. We have so many institutions in these countries which do check the arbitrary use of state power. And those institutions, they are not fettered by these laws. In fact, their powers are derived by the Constitution. So technically one can argue they are somehow superior to what we can do. We
Okay, let me allow Gadara to respond before we tackle Mohammed's question as we wind up.
When we talk about institutions, you know, and the ability to fetter or to...
I mean, he specifically mentioned the Office of the Ombudsman. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, my thing is across the board is if you look at, for example, when the president blew up or ordered the blowing up of the drug ship, which he did in contravention of a court order, nothing happened. You don't hear you guys in Parliament standing up and saying, actually, you know, the executive did something wrong. You know, doesn't exist. And this is my point, is the idea that our institutions are strong enough to hold the executive to account is not true. Many cases we've had of people in power, people in office, violating the laws, violating court orders that they're told not to do, and they go ahead and do it. We don't hear you guys standing up for that. So I'm a bit skeptical of this idea that let's just allow the government leeway and then somehow it's going to be checked. Actually, that doesn't seem to happen in our case. I'll just say two other quick points. First, there is the restrictions the law puts on coverage. Now, especially of terrorism-related issues, what can be shown, what can't, and where the police think that this will impede on an investigation so they can stop it, that you need to get permission essentially from the police when you before you decide what you're going to broadcast. You know, think about what happened at Westgate and the fact that the police actually were threatening to jail John Allen Namu and Mohammed, you know, because of the expose on what happened in Westgate. And think that you're giving those people, those very policemen, the power to decide what constitutes something that can impinge on their investigation. And then tell me that somehow they would allow our media to go and report about their misdeeds.
Okay, Gadara, I'll stop you there because I think you've made your point. I'd like you to respond to his point and also to Mohammed Mahmood's question on refugees with regard to the bill.
Let me answer about the what is supposed to be shown and what is not going to be shown. You only think about, and sorry for you because you are media, you think about the media. Do you think about the victims? Do you think about, let's say, for example, my mother, who wakes up in the morning, turns on their television, and they see I'm dead, and they don't have that information, prayer information. Do you think about them? What are you saying about it? You're only talking about media supposed to show it.
I would agree with you, and remember the picture that was in the Sunday Nation immediately on the day after Westgate started, on the 22nd, and lots of people complained. The question here, what you should be asking yourself, is whether the decision as to what goes into the paper is to be made by the state.
No, it's not a question of...
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
I have to close this debate.
Yeah, but is that...
But if it is given
Gadara,
just free
Mutambu,
like this...
I'm sorry, I have to close the debate because we're running out of time. But I have one question for you. Gadara, you're not in Parliament today, but if you were, what is the one thing you would say very, very briefly because we have to wrap up?
Well, if I was in Parliament, what I would say is, number one, is get rid of discretion, or at least the levels of discretion that are allowed in these bills. You know, that sit back and think about how they might be abused. I think that would be a much more productive way of approaching it. You know, and start by implement. What I would say is we don't even need this bill. You know, start by implementing the laws we already have in the books. The NPSA Act, the NIS Act, the KDF Act. You know, these laws exist and they are not bad laws. You know, start fast by implementing those. Start by executing the PBO Act. You know, before we go and say we need new laws. Okay.
Mutambu, what are you going to say? What should we expect you to say today?
No, forget about Parliament. I just want to tell my friend here. The reason why people go to church every Sunday and others go to mosque every Friday, not because the Bible has changed. So the world needs to be, we need to go every day and remind ourselves on how to live and make laws every day.
Okay, Irungu.
Okay.
Well, personally today when I go to Parliament, I'm going to support these proposals 100%. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to go there with an open mind. Any good proposal, whether it is coming from CORD or whatever, whether from the committee or even a proposal from Mr. Gadara, I'm going to take that into account and change the law accordingly. Number three, I'm going to ensure that the proposals, they do conform with human rights. This is a liberal country, and so therefore I must enjoin myself to protect the rights which are provided by the Constitution. Number four, so far, I'm here to be convinced as to whether these proposals, they do violate the Constitution or even the human rights. In my own opinion, there's a balance between rights, of course, absolute, and what we call duties and responsibility. Now, finally, and most importantly, let us not look these laws in isolation to other institutions. As to whether those institutions work, to me, that's another issue. But strictly speaking, they are there. They do check what I would say arbitrary use of state power.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm sure if we had another hour, we would still be going. And thank you all for watching and for responding. We've had quite a number of SMSs. Unfortunately, can't read all of them. And of course, for our viewers who called in and for everybody who tweeted. That still remains our question of the day. And we're asking you, do you think, regardless of whether Gadara says it's outdated, Parliament should pass the security bill as is? And as is what it is now, without the amendments that were made by the committees yesterday.